So, you're telling me that if I get in this submarine, dive down into an ocean of blood, navigate blindly with a shitty map and a poor sense of direction, take pictures of objects found in the blood ocean with an X-ray camera that irradiates me every time I use it, find evidence of something down there that can help save humanity after a cataclysmic cosmic event in which all stars and habitable planets in our entire known universe, including Earth, mysteriously vanished, leaving only barren moons for us to explore, and the one you just so happened to choose was a fucking blood ocean? All that so my prison sentence will be wiped and I'll get to go free.
Yes.
Yeah, alright, fuck it. Let's do it. Wait, why are you welding the door shut? I thought you said I'll be free. I'm gonna be free, right?
No.
I've been a fan of Markiplier's content for a long time. I actually started watching him because my mom got upset with me watching PewDiePie and all of his swearing when I was younger. Little did she know, at the time, Mark wasn't really any better. One of my favorite playthroughs Mark's done was of an indie horror game called Iron Lung by David
Zemansky.
Yeah, him. One of the reasons I loved watching him play Iron Lung was how into it Mark got. He felt like he was the convict in the submarine. And that made a lasting impression on him, so much so that he wanted to turn this game into a movie. Flash forward roughly 3 years later, and we now have Mark's self-financed adaptation that clocks in at 2 hours and 7 minutes long. So, how was it? Well, I have opinions, both positive and mostly negative. As it stands, the movie got the overall story of Iron Lung while taking creative liberties and expanding upon the lore of the original game. Now, before I go any further, huge spoiler warning for the movie is now in effect. If you haven't seen the movie but plan on going to see it, stop the video here. If you don't care about spoilers or won't go see the movie, then by all means, continue watching. One aspect of the story that felt weak to me was the inclusion of the 9-day battle at Filament Station, or at least the mention of the 9-day battle at Filament Station. As I said, it's mentioned multiple times throughout the movie, but it really lacks any substance. What was the battle? Why was it important? Why was Mark's character the only one punished even though he says he did nothing wrong? There were opportunities to expand on that, but all we got were vague flashbacks and the convict character just dodging any real explanation of what happened. And I feel that's also important to understanding the convict as a character. You can't really sympathize with this character because he lacks a coherent backstory. You're just introduced to this convict that's tasked to dive into an ocean of blood. Well, you watched my intro, that's essentially the story. There are a few other plot things that left me with questions. Firstly, what was the necklace monocle looking thing that the convict found? What significance did it have? What sort of deus ex machina drove the convict to finding that object? Not only that, but who wrote the note that it was attached to, telling the convict to cross the wires to turn on the sub's terminal? By the time we're introduced to the convict, he's already been welded shut into the sub. No one else has had access or has been in the sub save for the convict. I think the biggest issue with the story is how the convict is shaped to become an unreliable narrator.
But, Sam,
I hear you ask.
how is he an unreliable narrator when we clearly see all the things he's experiencing?
Well, viewer, let me ask you this. Are we? Are we really seeing the truth? Part of the game's mechanic is your oxygen meter. It serves as a timer for how you progress through the game. If the movie follows real-world logic, as the oxygen depletes in the sub, gets harder to breathe and all that, but your brain won't get enough oxygen either. In a lot of medical cases, this lack of oxygen to the brain can cause hallucinations. So how much of what the convict is experiencing can we trust? Continuing on with that notion, there's a part where the creature, spoilers, if you're not familiar with Iron Lung, there's a creature in the blood ocean. The creature rams into the sub, causing it to sink. It knocks out the power and the convict becomes unconscious due to blunt force trauma. In that period of time, he would have had no oxygen, and even by the time he wakes up, he still has no oxygen. He should have been suffocating. Instead, he had plenty of time to restart the engine's power manually and go on with the rest of the movie. So, did that lack of oxygen cause severe brain trauma, along with being thrown around in the sub many times, inducing hallucinations like someone speaking to him even though the only speaker in the sub was broken? And it even shows that the wire powering it was disconnected. Yet, later on in the movie, it shows that it wasn't broken at all and it was perfectly fine. Secondly, while the editing and the score for the movie was fantastic, the overall audio mix was... it was rough. And I say that as someone with a bachelor's in audio engineering and an interest in film sound. Granted, it could have just been the theater I was in. Even still, at least 80% of the dialogue throughout the film sounded either jumbled and incoherent, or distorted to the point where you lose focus on what's happening in the story and pay more attention trying to figure out what the characters are saying. A few instances of this include the music drowning out the narration, or the convict just speaking in general. The distortion from the speaker made it difficult to understand, and even in silence, you can barely hear anything the convict is saying. So, if you do go to see the movie, I recommend choosing a time or theater that offers closed captioning. Lastly, the ambiance for the movie was solid. It took pixelated graphics and made it more ominous and a little creepier. So, it's definitely a horror movie, right? Not really. I'd classify it more as a thriller. What makes Iron Lung as a game so successful is the quiet atmosphere you're trapped in. The scares come from banging the sub out of nowhere and the uneasiness you get when taking pictures of the outside. And the first time you see the creature on a photo, and in your next photo, it disappears. There's no loud jump scare or audio stinger. All there is silence, and the knowing dread that you're no longer alone down there. Markiplier's interpretation sort of goes the opposite. Sure, yes, the music adds the ambiance, but it takes away from the eerie silence. Having a main character that speaks doesn't really have the same effect as having a first-person point of view does, but it works for different things. I'd argue you can't really compare the game and the movie. They feel like two separate entities that tell similar stories, and, there's nothing wrong with that. Are there flaws? Yeah. But was it a fun, entertaining watch? Absolutely. But it was a slow burn. Well, that's my take. Go see Iron Lung and comment down below your opinions on the movie. I'd love to hear what you think. Bye!